Happy Monday, teachers, and welcome back to Inside the Classroom. I am tackling the topic of discipline tonight, so I hope all of you are saying a prayer for me because I know this is difficult. In recent years, we have seen teachers leaving the profession in droves. This is one of the reasons why I felt compelled to begin this podcast, is to reach out to the good ones, especially the believers, and to encourage and equip us to stay in the fight. It is also that time of year, April and May, where a lot of teachers are retiring. A lot of teachers are moving on to a different city or a different position, but more importantly, they are getting out of the profession completely into something else. And I argue that one of those reasons where teachers are fed up, they're exhausted, they're tired, I think one of the reasons is student discipline and how it is handled. So that is the purpose of tonight. And what I want to share with you, I am not saying is 100% right. It is fail-proof. But I do want to remind us and ground us in the actual real fight at hand. So the only way that I can conceivably do this is to split up into two parts. So tonight will be part one, and the facets of student discipline with the students themselves and how we respond to that. Part two will be the aftermath of that student discipline when there is a write-up or when there is a discipline center, when we get contacted with an administration and that struggle, because it is real. So I want to inform you that tonight I'm just going to discuss student discipline, both inside and outside of the classroom, because we see both. Inside of the classroom, we deal with anything from not turning in work to sleeping to being distracted by cell phones and earbuds to disrespect or troubles with redirection, as well as disruptive behavior of all kinds. My elementary teachers, I hope you see a lesser level of those things, maybe not even those things. It breaks my heart, and you'll hear me say that a lot, to hear the struggles of elementary teachers nowadays, because you are starting to see a lot of what we see here at the high school level. But outside of the classroom, we also have to deal with fights. We have to deal with poor attendance. We have to deal with drugs and sex. We have to deal with parents a lot more, and we have to deal with bullying and social media disinformation and gossip and what all of that entails. So student discipline is a large, multifaceted topic. So what I mainly can focus on, because it's my job, is inside the classroom. I monitor, just like a lot of other teachers. I'm outside of my door during passing periods. I have certain duty stations during lunch where I monitor students before and after school. So there are things that we can do to hold students accountable to their behavior. But inside the classroom is where most of the discussion will take place. And what I have heard a lot, and you probably have too, is mostly from teachers who've been in the profession a lot longer, and it's the idea of these students are the worst I've ever seen, or student disrespect is getting worse, or student behavior is getting worse. And I myself have peddled those statements when I'm caught up in frustration or I'm caught up in a situation that just irks me. But when I sit and think about it, two things come to mind. One, that statement is true. Pop culture is readily at their fingertips because of social media and because of technology. We haven't seen that before. I am part of that generation that didn't have phones. When I was in high school, phones were a new thing, and a lot of us didn't even have them because our parents didn't really see the point. So I understand that that is getting worse, and that misinformation or information in general is right there. But also, guys, we have to keep in mind, especially us as believers, that number two, none of this is new. None of the attitudes, none of the beliefs, none of the behaviors is anything God hasn't seen before. Isn't anything that educators, maybe not from where we are, in our cultural areas, but if you take into consideration education as a whole, I'm sure there are states and cities that have already been there, done that with some of these behaviors. And so I have to encourage us in that regard that it feels new, but it's not. Students have been difficult. Students have been consistent in their behavior for many, many, many years. I would maybe even say since the dawn of time. But it is exacerbated by social media and by technology. I will commit to that statement 100%. But as believers, God is not shocked by this. Our Lord and Savior is not taken back or in awe of how dare that student say that, or I can't believe that's happening on a public school campus. He's not. And so we as believers and as public educators, we can't either. We must stop perpetuating that statement that students are getting worse, because they're not. They're learning, they're immature, they will always be learning, because life is about the learning process. So I want to ground us in the verse from Ephesians. It's one of my favorites, and it's one of my good friends' favorites when we talk about struggles in the classroom, is Ephesians 6:12. And it says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." So, quick plug, if you've never read the 2-book series, This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness by Frank Peretti, I commend you to those 2 books, because it does a beautiful job of depicting and describing spiritual warfare and what the spiritual realm could look like as we walk this earth. But this verse reminds us that we don't struggle with that particular student. We struggle with their demon, or with their sin, or with their lie, or with their baggage that they walk into our classrooms with every single day. It's not the person, you guys. It's the things that are unseen. It's the things that they go home to that we aren't aware of. It's the things that happen to them when they're not in our classrooms. So we must stay committed to fighting those things and not the student himself or herself. So some examples. You might be saying, well, I don't know what you mean by that. I have been privy to several situations where there was a potential behavior issue. And in listening and in talking and asking questions and reaching out to counselors and parents, I've become aware of certain situations. Like, one student was homeless, without a home. For one particular reason or another, she was living in her car and came to school despite being homeless, and was written up because she continued to not turn in work. She had many missing assignments and was failing the class. But guys, educators, if we're in the people business, we have to consider the things that are not seen. And I'm sorry, doing homework in a car, that's just not feasible whatsoever. The second example that came to mind as I was thinking through this week's episode was another student who got kicked out of their house for, again, many different reasons, but ended up spending the night at our mall, which does close. So somehow he was able to find an inconspicuous place, lay his head down, get locked inside, and then was able to walk to school the next day. And understandably cocked an attitude with the teacher and was written up. Instead of that teacher talking or asking questions, or maybe extending some grace. These are just a few behavior issues that we see, and we have to be able to fight against the unseen to reach the student. So in order to do that, in my experience, which again is not a lot, this is my 11th year or so in public education, and I have come across difficult students from time to time. So I want to give you 3 easy things. If you haven't tried them, to just try them. And if you have tried them, keep trying them. I'm not saying these 3 things will work for every difficult student, but you can be the judge of that. Number 1, talk to them by pulling them aside, getting on their level, and asking questions. What I dislike to see, and I've been guilty of this myself, is when teachers talk down to students. If a student is starting to be a little disruptive and continues and begins to get disrespectful, the teacher stays standing and the student stays sitting, and you automatically have that power struggle just by body placement, just by body language. And instead, what I love to do is I love to crouch down and sometimes even position myself lower, because it's not a power struggle, or at least it shouldn't be. They know it's my classroom. They know I'm the adult. They know I'm the one with the experience and I guess the power, but I want to show them that I'm on their side. I want to show them that, hey, I'm not going to have this battle with you. Can you just talk to me? Or sometimes just taking them outside of the room, getting the class started, saying, hey guys, I'm going to step out. I'll be right back. Taking that student outside and just saying, hey, what's up? Talk to me. Is everything okay? You can't imagine what that could possibly do for that difficult student. I always have someone fire back and say, well, I can't do that for all of my students. Well, hopefully not all of your students need that. I would argue that in most of our settings of 25 to 30 students, maybe even more, maybe less, that there's 1, 2, maybe 3 in a class period. And yes, you do have time in that class period to pull those students aside or to crouch down next to their desk and whisper a conversation for less than 60 seconds. It doesn't take much. The second thing I like to do, especially when I have that student that is about to disrupt and become an absolute volcano, because you can tell when that's about to happen. They speak louder, they maybe start to stand up, or maybe students start to scoot away, and you say, hey, I need you to do me a favor. Can you run this errand for me? And a lot of times, it doesn't necessarily have to be a real errand. I could get in trouble for this. Not saying I do this all the time, but it quickly de-escalates the situation, even if it's just down the hall. It doesn't necessarily have to be all the way across campus. I'm not saying you should kick them out for the rest of the class period, but giving them responsibility, showing them that you do trust in their abilities and their capabilities, I think could go a long way. So it's a simple, piece of paper. Hey, I need you to take this over here. Hey, I need this teacher to sign this. Can you take it for me? I think will go a very, very long way. And the third one is really a personal one, which is don't take it personally. That one has absolutely nothing to do with the student and has everything to do with us as the teacher, because they're not being rude to you. They're not hating you. They're not disrespecting you. That's their way of fighting the battle that they have inside. It's their way of trying to control and trying to cope with whatever is going on. It's not you. I mean, it might be you, but a lot of times I guarantee that it's not. So when that happens, don't take it personally. You don't have to say, oh, this person hates me, or oh, this person always gives me attitude but loves this other teacher. Let it go. Say, hey, you know what? It's fine. Let's just take a break, time out. If you need to go to the bathroom, go ahead. Let the anger or the emotions subside and try again the next day. I've actually done this probably the most out of the other two options, because the next day, guaranteed, when that student walks up to me, I kind of, pull them over to the side and I'm like, hey, what happened yesterday? That that really hurt me. It didn't, because my identity lies in Christ. But I tell them it did, because hopefully that teaches them that what they did was rude and that doesn't need to continue to happen. And the anger isn't there. The embarrassment on their part isn't there. They don't have all of their classmates watching and feeding into that and giving him or her attention. So just wait, right? Raise your white flag, because it's not a power struggle. And then tackle that conversation the next day. Those three things, guys, is what I want to give you this week. Again, I'm not saying they're foolproof. I'm not saying they will work in 99% of the situations. They only may work in 3% of the situations. But I have been blessed by these three tactics because they've worked. And maybe it's because I know that I'm wrestling against unseen things. That might be it. So I encourage you guys to read this, to get more information about the true fight, the true enemy that we do have. Now, I would be naive to assume that your difficult students can be fixed and reached. I'm not saying that. Because as teachers, I do think that our crucible, maybe even our gauntlet, is to have that one or that handful of just very consistent, relentless, bad kid. And guys, that's just part of the job. I like to think we can reach everybody. I'm a big Miss G fan. You guys know that from Freedom Writers. I think that I can truly change and make a difference. But you know what? Sometimes we can't. And I've got to be okay with that. And you have to be okay with that and just recognize, hey, I want to conquer little things with this student every day. I want to savor the little victories, like keeping him or her awake, not letting them sleep. That is a victory. Making them smile, that is a victory. And maybe over time, those little victories might change him or her. It might not. You may see them after they've gone away from you and they still may continue to be a jerk. And you know what? Sometimes we just have to say, well, I'm going to wave the white flag on that guy, right? But it should not be our reason to give up altogether. I don't want us as public educators to be pushovers. I don't want us in public education to be pacifists. I do believe in setting high expectations, and I do believe in follow through on those expectations and holding students accountable to their actions, because that is the real world, and I expect the absolute best from the students who walk through my door. So I'm not saying give everyone second and third and fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh chances. You can't do that for your sanity. You cannot do that. All right. But take these three things that I've given you and try them out. Maybe one, maybe all three of them. So we can identify that this discipline issue isn't with the student himself or herself. It's something unseen. It's something in that spiritual realm where no one understands what goes on with that student or in that student's heart or in that student's mind, right? So educators, teachers, with all of this in mind, I encourage you not to give up. I encourage you to continue to fight the good fight and celebrate those little victories, and do not let discipline be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Take the camel for a walk. Give the camel some really good food. Give the camel a break 100%. Summer is coming. But do not let discipline be that thing that pushes you over the edge, because you're not alone. We all deal with it. It's not getting worse, and we can make a difference. Next week, for Discipline Part 2, I'll discuss the struggles we have with how discipline is handled by our administration. And in that, we must be wise, you guys, because as the teachers, we're the foot soldiers. We're the ones who get told what to do, and we have to do it to show respect and to have follow through. So hopefully next week, after you listen to this week, hopefully you'll be more inclined to listen to some more encouragement, some more equipping that I have for you guys. And I'm excited to walk with you through this. So thank you so much for watching. Again, I always encourage you to leave comments, to send emails, to follow on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Reach out to me. I would love to hear, especially from my elementary people, what you guys deal with on the daily as far as discipline goes. So again, thanks for watching, and God bless.